All right, hi everybody. I'm just doing a quick live broadcast here so I can record this and upload it for people to play later, because when we first did the community meeting on the Jasper School, some people weren't able to see it, and there was a glitch where I didn't have my Twitter hooked up correctly apparently, and so it didn't record. And so I really wanted to make sure that we could record this and send it to some of the other people who didn't get to see it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Jasper High School project. This is going to be a little bit of a recap of the community meeting, and it's going to tell you some updates of what I've done since then. So, obviously I'm Alicia Medetzky Cordes, grew up in Jasper. My family's been there for 4 generations. Medetzkys have lived there and farmed there. And so that's part of the reason why I care, but I also have a heart for historic preservation. And so I've always wanted to have some sort of nonprofit or some sort of program to help people in these types of situations. And so it's something that I have thought about before, and I've gone down some of the roads of looking into it for old homes, historic homes that my husband and I were looking at, renovating and things like that. So this isn't the first time I've thought about something like this. Basically, the school is still up for under auction. Luckily, the auctioneer, Yvette Vandenbrink, has been very helpful in communicating back and forth, and she was able to extend the deadline a little bit. Obviously there's been interest in the property, but I think really it's past the scope of what a lot of individuals can handle and afford, especially given the immediate repairs that would be needed and the risk to, if you were to take the building down, of possibly not getting a return on your investment within the next couple years. So it's definitely something that it's going to take the right kind of people in the right kind of situation for this to work out. So basically, just to recap, the taxes on the building are about $3,500 a year. For a purchase agreement or purchasing at the auction, we'd need about 15% down at the time of the auction, which would be non-refundable, and then we would split the closing costs. So the amount, would be several $1,000s, about $3,000 down, and then the remainder in closing in 60 or 30 to 60 days usually. So first of all, we'll talk about the tear it down option, because that seems to be the biggest thing that people want to say is, why don't we just turn it down or tear it down? So, that's fine if that's the route you want to go. And honestly, I'm giving up my time and my effort and my energy, connecting this and working to coordinate all of this, because I believe in the project and I think it's worth doing. But I can only do it if I have people behind me who also believe in it and want to do it too. We have to do it together. It's something that one person or just 5 people can't do alone. We're going to need a lot of people committed to either donate their time and effort or energy or some of their skills. So, if you were to tear it down, who pays for it? Honestly, I mean, that's going to be expensive. It's wonderful to just say, let's just get rid of that or dispose of that. But there's so many people who have this disposable mindset today, and especially in American culture, where when something no longer serves its purpose, or it's going to take work or effort or energy to, make it new again or fix it or repair it, people just throw it away and they want to get rid of it. And I think that's really irresponsible, especially because this was built by our town, by our community, by our ancestors. And what kind of respect are we showing them by just putting all their resource, their energy, their efforts to waste? I think that's really sad, and I think that it also tears down the fabric of what makes us unique and special in Jasper. And we have a quarry, we have this beautiful building of rose quartzite, Sioux quartzite that is unlike pretty much anything else in the world. It's very unique, and that's part of the reason why it is being looked at for historic status, and why the National Register, it was deemed eligible for the National Register just, under 10 years ago. So we would lose that historic building, we would lose that notoriety, that ability to drive in some tourists, and maybe even attract some businesses or residents in the building. So that would be a big, loss, something that we could capitalize on, that could make something in the future for the town a benefit. So we also would have loss of the significance of the history of the community. There are no longer craftsmen of the type that built that building available. It's very difficult to find people who can do that quality of work anymore, because we're not used to it. We have a lot of modern technology that has taken the place of that. And that's not always a bad thing, but it's just different. It's not the same. Also, you have to think about the cost of the land once you tear it down. When you have this big barren hole, first of all, what do you do with all the stuff that's there when you take that building down? You have to mitigate hazardous waste and materials before you can even tear it down. And several of the contractors who were in attendance said that could be several $100,000 just to mitigate things hazardous waste and things like that before you can even start demolishing it. And that's very expensive. Now, if you were to put several $100,000 into the building as it is, you would preserve a lot of it and you would actually bring it to better quality. You would fix the roof, you would be able to do some work on the heating, you would be able to mitigate the mold. And so that couple $100,000 could go a long ways to actually making that building usable again. So also you have to look at, what's the land worth without the building on? Probably not a lot. It's a small town, the property values are lower. Somebody might have some interest in the land, but then again, that's kind of a gamble. And until then, you have this huge barren lot in the middle of your town. It's kind of the heart of the town. So people's property values around that probably aren't going to be great. And just some things that you have to think about. In addition, what would it cost if you were to build a building like that today? You have to look at the value of what that structure is, even as it sits. And if you were to build a building like that today, it would cost, some of the estimates I've heard from contractors are over $20 million, $20 to $30 million. And that's the price of, building the Premier Center in Sioux Falls. That's a lot of money. And you have to take into consideration that building, just because it's being sold so cheaply, doesn't mean it's not worth anything. And so we have to get out of this mindset of, because the price tag's low, yeah, it's going to take money to, fix it and update it. But if it were being sold for what it's actually worth, it would be a lot harder for someone to put the money into repairing it than when you already have a high price tag to start with. So also, if you look at a lot of the information that I'm collecting this from, and I have gotten some information about these types of approaches or alternatives, they came from the Greenest Building document, quantifying the environmental value of building reuse. And that's a big study that came from Preservation Green Lab, which is preservationnation.org. So it's this awesome printable document that you can actually go see on their website. You can download it. It's 90 some pages, and it talks a lot about the research that they've done on projects like this. So that's really valuable information, because they've spent a lot of time and money and resources to figure out that it's actually much more cost effective in a lot of cases to use these buildings and to find a way to repurpose them, and it is not as expensive to retrofit them as you would think. And in the end, then you have a usable structure, and you preserved all the resources that went into building it and taking care of it, because up until the late 90s, the Jasper School District took very good care of that building. They were very frugal with their money. They always had paid for things. They paid for the upkeep. In 95, I believe, if I remember my historical booklet documents right, they had put about $300,000 into that building, and they had brought up a lot of asbestos issues up to code. They had wrapped and sealed a lot of that and coated that, and they had done new windows and some roofing work at that time. And so, that shows that the community cared and was serious about preserving this for the future. And unfortunately, after the CNC happened and stuff, in that 5 or 6 years, it was no longer, it was kind of disposable after that. The county or the school district was very interested in a new building, so they didn't really care about these old buildings anymore, and they didn't want to put the effort and energy into it, and they wanted to save some money. Well, unfortunately, then all that energy and effort and money that Jasper spent on that school kind of went to waste, because they said, well, we just want to demolish it, and luckily someone came in to purchase it and save it for the meantime, otherwise we wouldn't be here today. So, I look at that and I say, up until 95 to 2001, from that 6 or 7 years, they decided that this building that had been completely upkept and renovated up until that time was no longer worth anything. And I just find that really interesting, and I think that's really not fair assessment. And so I think that we have an opportunity here to do something really powerful and to take a lot of people working together to do something. So, basically at that time in 2001, 2002, some of the people in town, like Geraldine Peterson, and I think the Historical Society County Director Chris Hummel, I think, they and some other people went together and really approached the State Historical Society and said, can we save this building? They're recommending to tear it down, and what can we do? And so they had those people come out within a week. They came down from from Minneapolis and had a determination letter sent to the superintendent saying this building qualifies for on several criteria for the National Register, which is education, social history, politics, and government. If it's eligible, then that means you can apply to be listed on the National Register. That draws in a lot of tourism, and it also opens you up to be eligible for what they call a legacy grant to help preserve the school and have money to do some of the renovations that are needed. So, you know, this is a really powerful thing, and I've been in communications with the State Historical Society and even now, and so right now they are also planning, I think it's Dennis Gardner is my contact, and he is planning on coming to visit the school as soon as they can. Unfortunately, they can't do it before the 8th deadline, but they definitely want to come down within the next several weeks and tour the school and just make sure that, you know, nothing structural has really changed about it, nothing of historic value has left the building really, or is, you know, the structure is still pretty much intact and pretty much the same as it was then. And aside from, you know, the roof leaking and some of the damage inside and the dirt and the vandalism, it's pretty much the same building, so they don't have any doubt that it will probably again qualify. They're actually willing to do a kind of a shorter assessment because, you know, they've done it once before, and so all the historic value, everything like that hasn't changed. So you know, let's we talked a little bit about that, but also the way that we're going about this and trying to create a community action. This is an innovative way to do things. You know, most people have to go through all the proper channels or find a developer or find someone else to do this for them. And, you know, we kind of saw how that doesn't work very well today. You know, we had one individual who purchased it and had some great intent, but, you know, had some issues and wasn't able to complete that project. And it's a huge undertaking for just one individual and one stream of funding. So, you know, I really feel like this innovation is not only a way to pull the community together, but it's also something that we can do that opens us up for more grants. I've been in contact with a friend at the Bush Foundation in Minneapolis, and they have a community innovation grant that we would be eligible for if we are able to get our community to come together to do this and to, you know, purchase the school and do the renovations and set up the planning and set up the nonprofit. And so that's a really big deal because this is a really unique opportunity as well. And to have one more grant source is a big help and a big support. So as far as the proposal, you know, what I propose doing now, you know, at the time I listed all the options at the meeting of the ways that you can do a project like this. But right now we've kind of moved forward past that. We've kind of decided that the best way is to stick with the nonprofit route. We really need that tax deduction. We need those tax incentives that you can get also for tax credits that they have available for historic properties. And that's a big carrot to potential developers and things who might, you know, end up being a part of this project. So right now, my proposal is that we continue working. What I'm doing is working with the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota. And what they are doing with me is they have sent us some documents that we can fill out. We can become one of their places or sites of interest. And that means that they are vested interest in helping us preserve the site. And that also gives us a membership so that we can apply for a fiscal sponsorship. So this total process, both the sites of interest and fiscal sponsorship application, costs $300. So we do need a few volunteers who are willing to say, you know what, I'm going to go get an individual membership on their website, the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota, and I'm going to notate in the comments that I want this to go to Reclaim Community, which is the organization name that we're working under right now, is kind of just an association. Reclaim Community, because we're trying to reclaim this building and reclaim this town and use reclaimed materials hopefully and be able to preserve a lot of the existing footprint of the building and do some things that are going to cut costs as well. So I've been calling it Reclaim Community, and we just put Reclaim Community Jasper Project. So that way, if we get the $300 with the donations, you know, I'm putting in some money on this, and then I'm hoping some other community members will do this. This is separate from the generosity fundraiser, but it's all the details are also on our SOS Jasper High Facebook page. So if you're not a member of that group, please go join, because we're keeping everything updated on there until we can, you know, get a website set up. So that would be one of the first needs, because we need to do that immediately. As soon as we file the paperwork for that, I'm collecting the names and addresses and the donation amounts to put on my application form with my donation to ensure that we have that $300 met, because then we open up access for them as an existing nonprofit that's preserving history in Minnesota. They're going to be behind us and they're going to be helping us. They're going to be providing some labor and time to help us come up with proposals, to look for grants, and some of the things that they have access to, as well as giving us that tax deduction right now. So everyone's donations will fall under tax deduction. If we were to go about the nonprofit status right now by ourselves, it would take 6 to 8 months. And we can do that with another organization called MAP for Nonprofits from Minnesota. And they have a wonderful staff attorney I've been talking to about this, and they are willing to help us out. They also have fiscal sponsorship available, but Preservation Alliance kind of fits our goal a little better, so I think they're the route we need to go, because they have that special interest in just preservation of historic buildings. So if you go to their website, you can also see a number of buildings similar. There are some schools, there's some town halls all over Minnesota that they've actually done this with. So we're not the first community to do something like this. We might be the first one to do it in this exact way of trying to get a grassroots group going, but they already have shown that they have done this and helped other organizations. So that's a great resource. Go to Preservation Alliance of Minnesota's website, look up the sites of interest that they have on there, and they'll have descriptions and stories about what they did. So, you know, as far as getting that going, I've got that in the process. The other thing that I'm doing right now is that I'm preparing to find an organization in Jasper, hopefully maybe the Community Development Foundation, the Lions Club. I'm working and looking for contacts in those groups, maybe a church in Jasper. So if you have a connection, please let me know. We need an organization willing to go to the People's Bank in Jasper and open up an account underneath their tax bracket to, you know, do this the right way, make sure that it's tax deductible. It's also protected under their organization until we have this fiscal sponsorship, which could take a week or two to set up completely, so that we can collect donations. And I know a lot of people might not have access to the internet or want to do donations on Generosity on the line. So then that way they can send cash or checks, you know, stop into the bank or send checks to People's Bank in Jasper. So that's my goal, and that's what I'm working on also today, is really looking for somebody really quick who can find an organization like a church or someone willing to work with us and say, hey, yeah, we'll set up an account for you guys and we're going to help you manage this until you can get out on your own. So that is one of the biggest priorities right now. So as far as the renovation expenses that we're going to expect to need right away, you know, the biggest thing is the purchase price. And, you know, $17,000, you know, doesn't sound like a lot, but of course we have to think about what the costs are going to be to rehabilitate this building. And so, you know, the initial price of something is usually not as expensive. You know, my dad always said that, you know, if you adopt an animal like a dog, the cheapest part is the donation to get it, and then you have to have the upkeep afterwards. And so on the Generosity website for the fundraiser, what I actually did is I created about $25,000 as an initial purchase fund. And what I want that fund to do is obviously the $17,000 that we need, you know, in 30 or 60 days, and then also have a little bit of cushion on there so that we demonstrate we have a little extra. We can file some of these paperworks that we're going to need. We're going to be able to afford to do some of the nonprofit things that we need to do. And then we also will have, there's a percentage for like credit card fees and things that they will charge us through Generosity just to take those donations for us. So there's a small percentage of a couple percent that we need to have for that. In addition, we also will need to think about the taxes on the building. It's only about $3,500 a year, which isn't much, but it's something that we need to think about and think out, you know, how are we going to continue to prevent this building from deteriorating and make sure that we're staying up with all the legalities of what we have to do. We're probably going to, you know, have to work with the attorney either at MAP for Nonprofits or have an attorney help consult with us and, you know, determine liabilities and things like that that we need to pay attention to, insurances and stuff like that. So these are all things that we're thinking about and we're trying to plan for. So, you know, at the minimum, we need about $3,000 to $4,000 next week to purchase the building. And, you know, if something were to happen and we aren't able to come out with everything that we need, luckily I know the auctioneer is really willing to work with us, and hopefully the family will be willing to work with us if we aren't able to, you know, complete this by the time of the auction end. Or even if the county, you know, has to repossess the building or something because it doesn't sell, we need to have some sort of a donation fund to show that we are serious and that we have an intent and we are working on a project, because, you know, honestly, money talks. If you care about something, you will invest time and you will invest money into it. That's the bottom line, is you put your money with where you care. And I care, so I'm willing to put money and time into this. We have had several contractors walk through, actually, at the meeting. We've had several contractors familiar with the building, like you might know Terry Skyberg if you're from town. He's been a really great friend of the building. He's helped the family out and helped caretake it, you know, basically out of the goodness of his heart for a long time, and he's very concerned about getting some minimal temporary roof repairs and things done in the meantime. And so he's been really encouraging and wanting to help with this project. We also had another gentleman from Jasper who stopped, I forget his name off the top of my head, but he was a contractor who actually had familiarity in working with mold remediation in humid places like Florida. And so he really gave us some good insight into these new products that you can use to remediate mold in the building that are actually less expensive and less intensive, and you don't have to demolish as much of the building because you can pretty much use these special coatings to seal any mold off and kill it, because you're basically smothering it, and then it protects it and you can just paint right over it. You know, you might have to still tear out some areas, you know, some plaster and things where mold has gotten in, but in a building like the school, the majority of it is stone, it's brick, there's not a lot of plaster, you know, there's some woodwork, but in the areas where the mold is worst, it's usually actually in the cafeteria and in the newest addition where it's mostly like concrete block and stone. So we're lucky in that sense where it probably hasn't spread a whole lot yet, and honestly the roof leaks have been a little bit more recent. So if we can get those fixed, get the water stopped, and do some temporary measures, you know, it's not going to get much worse in the next couple months than it already is, and that gives us time to start planning for the next step and the next phase. So obviously the roof and getting the heat on probably and drying out that mold is the first priority. I know these contractors were also the same people who gave us some estimates on, you know, building a brand new building and saying it's going to cost 20 to 30 million if you were to build this building itself right now the way it is. So they also said that, you know, minimum we're going to need a couple $100,000 to get this building up to ability where you can actually be in it and start working on it, and it's not going to be habitable unless you spend, it could be up to a couple $1 million. But what I want people to remember is you're going to spend at least $1 million, probably $500,000 to $1 million to tear it down from the estimates I've heard from contractors who have looked at it and walked in. So are we going to put $1 million or $500,000 into it and just have a dirt hole, or are we going to actually have a building that can bring some value and some life to the community and has a potential of increasing residents, increasing business in the area, increasing tourism, which is, I think, is a huge thing. You know, we really have a lot of neat stuff. We have a great museum for being such a small town. I mean, people like Geraldine have put their heart and soul into that, and they should be commended for the work that they have done. And it's time for us to say, you know what, we're not going to wait for someone else to say, you know, wait for someone else to save us, wait for someone else to swoop in and do the work. You know, these day and age, everybody wants someone else to do it, and we need to do it ourselves. We need to say, this is our responsibility, this is our town and our community, and we care. And if we care, you know, we're going to find other people out there who care about it too. And just getting the awareness out, just sharing the posts on Facebook, just donating and challenging your friends to donate, even if it's $5 or $20. You know, I just want people to think about the fact that if we had everyone donate $50 who lived in Jasper, that's about 650 to 700 people, and if you count the surrounding farm areas, we would have this building purchased already, and we would have a fund set up, and we would be making roof repairs. So it doesn't take much. You know, $50, you can spend that going out to dinner with your spouse these days. It's very hard to stay under that. So when you think about that, it doesn't take a lot from a lot of people. You know, if we get the greater community, the greater region in Sioux Falls and Pipestone and not Jasper, Edgerton and Marshall and some of those communities helping us and supporting us and saying, you know what, if it's good for Jasper, it's good for our whole region, because we all have similar interests in similar, you know, farm communities and places that people are coming to visit. So if they're going to visit Jasper, there's a good chance they're going to visit our town too. They're going to come and see the Pipestone Monument. They're going to see some other places in the area and stay. You know, there's even potential if we do what my proposal is, which is to create some sort of cooperative, sustainable housing and a multi-purpose type of building with, you know, business space and community space in the lower levels. You know, we're going to get types of people who kind of want to move out of the city. They want to be in a more rural area. They want to have some space. You know, that's a 2-acre plot of land there, you know, probably about an acre left after the school. And there's spaces where we could have community gardens. We could bring some fresh fruit and vegetables to town, because there really isn't a grocery store that has that kind of stuff anymore other than a small convenience store. And we, you know, you need a little bit more. And if it's something that's a community type of co-op, then everybody's an owner and a member, and it benefits the community, and it's going to keep the costs down, and it's going to provide a service. You might not have to drive to Sioux Falls or drive to Pipestone as often. You know, then we might support some small local farmers who want to have maybe a farmer's market there. You know, that's an option for the land. You know, if you have residents in the building, you could bring 30 or 50 people into town. If you have a couple businesses in the building, you know, then you're bringing people into town. You know, these days there are a lot of software companies or companies that, you know, have people doing medical billing or coding that work from home. There's a lot of people in the area of Pipestone and Jasper that actually drive to Sioux Falls to work. Maybe some of those people would want to move to Jasper. It's a little bit closer to the interstate, you know, and doesn't want to live in a cool kind of loft style industrial building? And that's someplace I lived in Sioux Falls, and people are doing it here, and they're paying a large amount of money to live in those types of properties. You know, one of my goals for this project to keep costs affordable is to work with really creative people, creative architects and designers who can say, what do we have here? What existing structure do we have, and how can we design around that? How can we not take out too much of the historic integrity and preserve some of those neat, the neat character of the building? We lived in the Harvester building in downtown Sioux Falls, and it had exposed brick, high, 14-foot ceilings, exposed pipe. It was a really neat building. It was great to live in because it looked like an old building, and a lot of people love that. And it's some of the more modern apartments and more modern buildings, they're just making to look like modern apartments inside, and then the only thing that's has character or history is the outside. And to me, that's not quite as fun, and it's not as taking as much advantage of what you can do. And if you look at bigger cities, you're seeing people who are creating cooperative, sustainable housing, and they are moving together and buying out apartment complexes and things like this, and they are combining their resources to have an affordable space to live. They all have a membership, ownership of that community, and they're also having, sharing gardens, sharing a workshop for maybe woodworking, sharing craft areas, having a shared maybe kitchen spaces where they can have community meals. There's a lot of options for this type of building, and those are some things we can think about in ways to conserve costs by preserving a lot of the footprint, using existing walls. Maybe putting up and tearing down walls isn't so big a deal, but figuring out the smart ways to run piping and plumbing and things like that, and going around where it kind of already is existing and not having to change too much. That only preserves the character of the building, but it also makes it a little bit more cost effective. And if you're not going back to have to finish every little last square inch with a bunch of drywall, you're also going to save some costs there. So these are all some things I think about with the vision, but this vision can change as we get some of these projections, as we get some of these grants. There are grants available from the Green Lab, from Preservation, that help and are designated just for people doing sustainable types of construction and renovation. So using energy efficiency, there's an option to use things like alternative energy sources, solar or wind power. And these are things that, Jasper has wind turbines right outside. Maybe not having them to that extent, but putting some solar panels on the roof can really lower the costs. Sorry about that, my phone rang. So, but having some of those things to think about to cut the costs down would be really helpful, because we also would be able to pay for the building or help it pay for itself in the future. And so my idea as far as having a cooperative type environment and setup is that the community has control of the building, has control of what's going on, and everybody kind of has a vested interest and a membership and ownership in it, and is able to continue and maybe create a fund of some sort to help pay for the costs of maybe future renovations or future energy needs and expenses and things like that. So these are all things that work really well. I mean, we have energy cooperatives and other types of cooperatives, cooperative grain elevators, and I think that model really works really well in this type of situation. So hopefully we've talked about a lot of the things that you might have questions about. To kind of recap, we're working with Preservation Alliance of Minnesota to get a nonprofit status, fiscal sponsorship under their nonprofit, and allow us to have tax-deductible donations. We're working on an account at People's Bank for people to send or drop in cash or check donations there. And I need an organization from Jasper to step up and help us with that. So if you know a church, if you know someone in the Lions Club or the Community Development Foundation, please get me in contact with them. You can find me on Facebook. I also will have this posted on the Jasper City page on their website, so that you can have access to this and share this video with people. If you have any other ideas and questions, please join our SOS Jasper High group and get the word out there. Go to the generosity page. It's under SOS Jasper High Initial Purchase Fund. If you look on generosity.com, it's a part of Indiegogo, and you'll see the ability to donate there. And really, we have a very limited time. The auction ends, I believe, the 7th. I thought it was the 8th. What Yvette told me, but in the newspaper it said the 7th, so they might have it wrong. So go there and make a donation. Anything small is fine. You know, if you have $10, $50, $100, some people might have more than that. And if you do, and you really believe in this project, you want to be a part of it, you know, we could use all the help we can get. And if you're not around, in the area, that might be the only way you can really support right now. But think about in the future too, we're going to need volunteers. We're going to do this because one of the other options that some of the contractors I've talked to have brought up is the fact that there's organizations like Wells Fargo who send out volunteers to help nonprofits on labor for work like this cleanup and things like that. They do it for places like Habitat for Humanity and things. And I know Thrivent Financial, which I'm a member of, also has money and support for people who are going to do these kinds of grassroots things. So I will be looking into those sources as well. Maybe your employer or someone you know also does things like this, and somebody in the Sioux Falls or Marshall or somewhere area has says, you know, we have 20, 30 volunteers, staff members that we're going to come help you on a weekend. We're going to clean up the school. We're going to clean up broken glass. We're going to, you know, take a mop through the place and do some of these initial things that we can start working on. And then maybe there's some contractors in town that can say, you know what, I'll donate a day of my time on Saturday to work with some other contractors or work with some volunteers to, you know, do some temporary patching on the roof, to get some of the stuff dried out, to get some windows open and get some circulation in there. You know, these are all options that we're going to be setting up volunteer like phone trees and communication lists. So I definitely need your info if you want to be on that. And then if there's some sort of resource, you know, if you are a contractor, if you are a house cleaning person, if you have a connection to somebody who's great with social media marketing and making videos and updating people on this, or putting together some sort of flash video or you know, something to get the message out there and get more people interested in what we're doing, you know, I would take any help that we can get because clearly I don't have all those skills myself, and it's better if we kind of, you know, delegate and find everyone's gifts. So if you have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and end this recording, and then I'm going to have it posted so that you can check it out. Any of the websites that I mentioned, go ahead and go to them or contact me on Facebook. And then if I have anything else, I'll do shorter video recordings in the future and save these. So I will have the links up on YouTube, hopefully, if I can get this to upload to YouTube, but otherwise I'll send the link on Facebook and on the Jasper City website. So look forward to more information. I will let you know when the Historic Society decides to come down. I'll keep people updated on the donations we've received, and also on when we want to have another community meeting, because I do intend on having one. But basically right now I'm holding off because I want to see how many of the Jasper community and former students and former staff, how many of you are really serious. You know, will you put your money where your mouth is, and, you know, you say you support us, but can you help us by getting an initial fund just for us to start getting off the ground so that we can have availability to get grant money afterwards. You know, I don't expect everybody to fund, you know, a couple $100,000 to $1 million on their own. I expect that we go through these channels to do it the smart way. And so think about what you're able to do and what part you want to play in this, and let's get moving, because we have till the 8th. And even if we don't get all the funding we need, we at least need to have something to continue to move forward and show that we're serious and that we're continuing to progress on this. So yeah, hopefully that answers everyone's questions, gets you up to speed with where we are right now, and I will hopefully see you soon.